So, hey, this is Sam from One Forward Step, and this is our first interview ever. We're trying to basically figure out how to get rich and manage our money better and stuff. So we've got Bart Milatz with us, a good friend of mine, who is an accountant and is also an international has an international qualification in teaching. And he is going to share. We're going to just ask him a few questions about money and see if we can take anything from it ourselves. So Bart, good to see you. And I was just going to ask you, like, what is the first, tell us about your first memorable experience with money that you had.
Sure. Hi, Sam. Hi, everyone watching this. Yeah, my first memorable experience with money was probably when I was about 7, 8 years old. So my dad, he's running his own construction business in the Netherlands, where I'm from. And, he would work really long hours, like 6 in the morning, he would wake up, he'll be back home like 8, 9, 10 at night sometimes. And he was just working really, really hard. And often at the dining table, I will hear him complain like, I work so hard for money, and these rich clients, they're just not paying, and they're just bad people, and they just try to nail me, and they're not fulfilling the obligations of the project. And seeing that as a child was, I wouldn't say traumatizing, but it was definitely hurting me. And it also didn't make sense to me. I thought, if you work hard, definitely you must have something to show for it, right? Like, we weren't that bad off, but we weren't that great off either, just like kind of a lower middle class household. And I really wanted to help my dad. So the first thing that came up was, I'm gonna call these rich people, his clients, and I'm gonna ask them, why don't you pay my dad? He works so hard. And I remember, like, this was like in the early email days as well. I sent this one client an email like, why are you not paying my dad? You worked so hard for a year on your project and you're not paying him. So obviously he called my dad and he said, how dare you talk about money with your child? And my dad got really angry with me. He basically drove me to his house, his client's house. And he said, you're gonna apologize to him right now, and you're gonna like mow the lawns for him or do something like that.
Wow.
And I was
at 8 years old. Just to interrupt, this was at 8 years old.
That was a few years later. I was 11 years old at the time. But it was all the same situation, like a couple of years hearing my dad complaining about rich people. And I really wanted to help my dad. So I was actually setting boundaries for him, like for the clients to pay him. So my dad dropped me off. It was in a village nearby. And I told him, I'm not going to do that, Dad. So he dropped me off, but I didn't apologize. I didn't mow the lawns. I just walked back home. And my dad's girlfriend at the time, when I told her this story, she said, you're right. It's good to set clear money boundaries. Now I realized it wasn't my job to set boundaries for my dad around money, right? But it did get me started on like, how can I help people to work hard and also make money? So during high school, we had a lot of, these job related tasks, like what do you want to do when you grow up, like job personality profiles. And even though a lot of them said like, oh, you should be an engineer or like a scientist, like I felt like I really want to be an accountant to help business owners and people to make money. Like, you can work so hard as you want, but if you don't manage your money wisely, like, why do you work so hard for it? And at the same time, money was also such a taboo topic. Like, whenever I wanted to talk about it at the dining table, I was immediately shut down. Like, don't talk about that. You're not supposed to talk about it. It was almost like this taboo. And I remember, like seeing my dad with those issues. I never wanted to have those issues myself. So as a young kid, I always had like a job, like running newspapers, even working for my dad in the evenings and weekends, selling stuff on eBay. And all the money that I made, I will bring to the bank. Like, in those days, you didn't really have online banking. You had to take the cash, go to the bank, deposit it. You got like a receipt. And I was really proud of myself for doing that. But my family said, oh my God, Bart, you're so scared that you never have enough. Like you always save your money. And yeah, all these events just completely didn't make sense to me at all. And that's what I realized at high school as well. We were never told anything about money. It was always, how do you pass your exams? What do you want to do growing up? You can work for a company till you are 70 years old and retire. And it just never made sense to me. Like, why wait till you are 70 years old to retire, right? And I'm sure many people watching this have the same upbringing, like work hard, get good grades, listen to your teachers or your parents. And then when you're 70 years old, then maybe you can retire from life and, die rich, so to speak.
Start living.
Start living. Exactly. Yeah, so that's kind of my first memorable experience with money. And yeah.
That's an awesome experience. I was very curious, actually, when you went to the house and actually to the client's place, you said you didn't apologize. So what actually happened in that moment? And what made you decide not to apologize as well? At such a young age, it's quite a very confident viewpoint that a lot of people are influenced by their parents, especially around money, and they take their beliefs with them. You seem to have a different view. So what happened in that moment?
That's a really good question. So my dad basically dropped me off in front of the house and he drove off. So in the car, he said, "You're gonna apologize." He just dropped me off in front of the home and he drove off. So that also gave me the freedom, like not to apologize and walk back home. And back home, my dad asked me, "Did you apologize?" I said, "No, I didn't." But the thing is, because I set such clear boundaries from a child, seeing my dad crushing my boundaries, that actually really affected me for the rest of my life. Because later in my life, I didn't set those clear boundaries because in my mind, I linked up, if you set clear boundaries, you're being punished. And yeah, I wish my dad never did that, and that my dad told me how to actually, set boundaries for yourself. And that's what I wanted. I wanted to protect my dad. Like as a child, I think you can be quite naive. You want to help and protect and love. And this was my way to show love for my dad, to protect him from these rich clients that don't pay. Like, yeah, that was what I was thinking at the time. I just wanted to help him and to protect him. So that was my intention.
And his initial thought is that you were affecting business or something, or?
My assumption is that he thought it's going to damage the relationship with the client. But, it wasn't a great relationship to begin with. And this was actually my dad's fault. He didn't set the clear boundaries. He didn't have the contracts,
Right.
which the client clearly had. And that made my dad link up like, oh, rich people are evil and bad and they don't pay. Whereas they were just a little bit smarter and they had their boundaries in place.
Very true. Setting boundaries is really important.
Yeah.
Something you said that made me think about something that happened to me, which was early on in my teens, and now that's like 20 years ago now, or whatever. I was always thinking about money and thinking like, if I save £10 a day, and over the course of a year, it's only £3,650. It's not a lot of money. And then if you times that by 10 years, it's 36,500. Inflation and stuff like that. I'm never going to be able to get on a property ladder, all these negative views. And I didn't realize until a lot later, I heard about compounding, which I'm still trying to understand now. Yeah. So I want people to look at this and go, look, I've only got 4 figures saved, but what would you tell someone about retiring early? How can they start even seeing that as a possibility with that sort of mind state that I had and still kind of have today? So this is for me too.
Yeah, that's a great question, Sam. So, when I did my accounting qualification and I became a qualified accountant, I realized that I myself was a broke accountant. Like I was making money for companies and, setting the budget and preparing the books, but I was living paycheck to paycheck myself. And I realized, I need to master my finances. Like I want to retire early as well, not wait till I'm 70 years old. So I started reading a lot of personal finance books, and a lot of finance books, they talked about compounding. And almost every single book gave the same useless example. Like they say, oh, if you don't go to Starbucks, you save $5 a day. And if you put it in a index fund in 50 years, you have a gazillion dollars. And it really pissed me off because they use these statistics from the stock market from like 50 years ago. And 50 years ago, you didn't have the investing and the freedom that you have available today. Like today, with a click of a mouse, you can buy stock, you can sell it with 0 transaction cost. But back then, you had to call your broker, they had to place an order, you had to wait for a few hours, you had to pay $50 for a transaction. I remember 15 years ago in Australia, when I started investing, I had to pay $25 per trade and then $25 when I sold it. So if you buy stocks for just, $100 or $200, your stock has to go up by 20-50% just to break even on the cost. Plus they had like annual fees, foreign exchange fees, etc. So I'm all about compounding, but people have to realize that don't listen to these people that use examples from the past, because the first rule of investing is that past results are no guarantee for future performance. That's the first rule. But all these personal finance books, they were talking about this compounding myth, or there's this other story about a guy that plays like chess, and then every chess board is like double, and in the end he has like, I don't know, so much money. But the way you use compounding is really by focusing on increasing your income. Because if you can increase your income, you compound the amount of money that you can save and invest. And those potential returns on your investment, like dividend income, salary increases, bonuses, that's what's going to allow you to really compound your money situation. It's not going to be the stock market by itself. It's really you growing and compounding as a person, not just the S&P 500 or an index fund that, that they tell you you're going to be a gazillionaire 50 years from now.
Yeah, because that's almost like going into the retirement idea, isn't it? It's like, you put your money away with a company and hope that by the end of it, that you'll have enough to live on. And
yeah, exactly. And I remember a client of my dad, he retired in 2008. So a couple of months before he was about to retire, he did everything what these personal finance gurus told you, everything in the stock market, like you put money in there every month. But 2008, wrong timing. He lost 70% of his investments. Like if that happens before you actually retire, like he was devastated. And it can happen as well. Like today, the economy is still okay, but inflation is like 10-15%. Interest rates are rising. There's like war everywhere. Like you cannot depend on just one form of compounding. You have to compound your salary. You have to compound who you are as a person. You have to compound your net worth, like how you feel about money, your self-worth. And all of that combined, that's really going to give you that compounded growth in money.
Interesting. So you're basically saying that there's, not just the saving of $5 at Starbucks will do it for you, not just increasing your salary will do it for you. It's about combining all of these things together, and that compounds in itself to give you much more to invest in, etc. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. And think about it, as you said, like if you only save $5 a day with Starbucks, it's not going to make you a millionaire. As Tony Robbins said, you have to major in the major things and not in the minor things. And saving $5 a day, like it's not going to make you wealthy eventually. The only people that this will work for is people who spend more than they earn. And that's a way of compounding, right? If you earn $1,000 a month, but you spend $1,200 a month and 300 of that is Starbucks, yeah, you'll be really better off to save on Starbucks. But otherwise, there's no point. It's better to really focus on the major things like negotiating a 5, 10, 20,000 pay rise a year, or looking for a better job that pays you double, or starting your own business or a side hustle. you don't get rich by saving pennies. You get rich by, owning your net worth and feeling that you're worth it.
Yeah, definitely. If anyone's watching this and wants to check out, I think Googling Warren Buffett inflation speech or something like that, which he recently did, it basically says that the way you actually increase your value, cover inflation is increasing your own value in the market. So your earning potential. So that's one way to combat inflation. Well, what I would love to talk about to you, Bart, is try and find out how you make money. Like, I wanted to interview you because I think you're at a stage where you're not a millionaire yet. You're at a stage where you're building steadily, and I don't think it's too far away from where someone can start. So before we go into where people can start, just tell us a little bit about, for me as well, for selfish reasons, like what are you doing to make money, like specifically?
So at the moment, I still work full-time as a senior financial accountant. So that's one source of income. Then I have interest income. I have dividend income from my investments. And my other form of income is I sell online courses. I have audios that I get like a royalty fee on.
Audio?
Audio income from audio programs that I have on Spotify, Apple Music, Google Play, and that sort of thing. Those are my main sources of income. In the past, I lived in Thailand for 6 years, and I had a really successful teaching business. I was teaching English and maths and economical programs to both schools, but also businesses, and they paid really well. Before Thailand, I lived in Australia, and I was making money in real estate. Looking back, it was kind of illegal because I was basically renting a big house or a flat, and I was just subletting the rooms. So that helped me to pay for university while I was there. So yeah, in every place where I lived, I always made good money. And of course, it depends on the time. It depends on the location where you live. And also on your skills and what you're interested in. You have to find authentic ways for you to make money. But these are the ways for me that feel authentic at the moment. And in the future, they may include other sources of income like rental properties or whatever. But at the moment, that's not my cup of tea.
Legal ones, yeah.
Yeah, definitely legal.
Because I would like to say that to people, right? We're just saying things that's happened to us. We're not advising you on doing any of these things. But like, I've definitely had that experience before where I tried, I was staying with my mum and I wasn't paying any actual money towards the situation for a short period of time. And then I tried to go down the credit score rating side of things. And they said, register, one of the ways to increase your credit score in the UK, this is get on the electoral register. And by doing that, you register your address. And then not long after that, we got a letter from the council saying, you have someone living with you. So by all means, don't, if you're going to go down this route and you're doing anything that is a bit underhand, be careful what you actually do. You might walk into a few transitional situations between that. So what would you say, would you be open about your numbers? Like, would you be able to say what you sort of like you're earning and how much the course stuff's bringing in? Because we all know, like you said in one of your posts recently, like, 20 odd pounds a day, if you could get that extra, then it would bring you £10,000 a year. Yeah,
definitely. So my full-time salary is about 60,000 a year. Now this is before tax. So after tax, it's about 3.5K a month. And this is in British pounds. Then my dividend income is, let me check quickly. Yeah, it's usually about 200, 250 a month. And then my course income really varies. So most months it's about $200-300 all combined.
A month?
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's really good. Yeah. And like with the dividends, because this is the thing that starts to interest me a little bit more, is people look at the stock going up and down and they think, oh, you've got to get in at the right time and all this sort of stuff. But if you just buy and hold, is what I'm learning, and you actually invest in stocks that actually pay dividends, you can get residual income every month, and you don't have to remove any of your stock, no matter if the stock's up or down. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's why I became a dividend investor. Also because, I'm running my own business. I still have my full-time job. And dividend investing seems the way to go. And when I first started dividend investing, I looked up this website where they have like all the companies and the dividend yields. And I invested in the companies with the highest dividend rate. So they had like 30, 40% dividend. But
What does
sometimes
that mean? Can you explain that to someone who doesn't know? What 34 to 40% dividends, what does that mean in numbers?
That's a good question. So it means like if you invest £10 in a stock per year, if it's 30%, you get £3 back in dividends. So that's called the dividend rate, the dividend yield. Or if it's 40%, you get £4 a year, which is 40% of your investment of £10.
And that's technically per share, is it? So if the share was £10 a share and you bought one of them, and it went up 40%, you would get £4 of that £10 share.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, even if you bought 10 shares of £1 each, you still get the £3-4 combined dividend yield. But what I quickly learned is that sometimes there's a reason that companies have a big dividend yield. Like if the stock crashed and you bought it, so maybe the stock crashed from £30 to £10 and they still pay the same dividend, it's got to be 30-40%. Or sometimes, the company pays out so much that it's unsustainable to provide long term. Like in the example of the £10 share with a £4 dividend, if the company only earns like £2 a year in net income after tax, it's not sustainable for them to keep paying you £4. So I quickly learned that, and actually some of the companies that I bought in the beginning, they went bust. So I had nothing to show for it. I thought, yay, I have short-term 40% income, but it didn't last. So that really got me into investigating like what's the right dividend yield and what sort of companies. So I created this tracker, this sheet where I keep like all the companies that I buy, the dividend yield. And what I learned over the last 2-3 years is that the optimal dividend yield is about 8%. So 8%, it's not too risky, it's not too low for risk, but it's really a sustainable dividend yield that, the average beginner in dividend investing can really achieve. So some companies pay maybe 10%, some pay 6%, but the average that a person can earn, I believe, in a safe way is about 8%. And at the beginning of your call, you talked about inflation, right? And that's a big thing. Like if inflation is 12% and you only get, that 8%, you practically lose 4% of your money power, your purchasing power every year. And
could you repeat that? Because I didn't quite get that.
So if the inflation at the moment is 12%,
yeah,
but the dividend yield of stocks that you buy is 8%, basically the prices of goods and services go up by 12% every year, and you only get 8%.
You're losing 4% each year.
Exactly. Yeah, so you lose 4% of your purchasing power. But usually inflation is about 2-3% in the long run. And this is why even with inflation in the long run, this 8% minus 2 or 3% inflation gives you 5-6% net return after inflation.
So like, why do companies give dividends in the first place? Do you know? Because I have no idea still.
Yeah, there's a lot of different theory about this. One of the theories says that if a company cannot find suitable projects to expand on, they decide to reward their shareholders instead. So rather than buying another company, they just give it back to their shareholders. So that's one theory. Another one is to keep shareholders happy. Like, before Apple paid dividends, one of their shareholders was really pushing Apple. Like, what do you do with all these billions in cash sitting there? You're not buying any companies, you're not developing anything new. Like, pay it out as a dividend. And under shareholders' pressure, that's when Apple started to pay dividends. Because what else can they do? They have the money in the bank, they're not buying anything, they're not doing anything with it. So shareholders say, well, give it back to us.
And
So
what's the benefit for Apple doing that? Do you know?
keeping their shareholders happy, I suppose.
I see. That's definitely seems like a rabbit hole I could go down and spend like a couple of hours on, so I won't. But like, with regards to the investing side of things, and like where would you recommend someone could start if they've got, say, an extra £100 a month that is just sitting there in the bank, losing interest, getting 1% in a bank account, and not giving them much, and they're against 12% inflation.
So I would always like to follow this formula. You save before you invest, before you speculate. So with someone who doesn't have anything, I still recommend saving, like even if it doesn't necessarily pay anything, because while you save, you educate yourself on the next level of risk to take. And that's how I started. I started with HSBC. They had like, you could save a maximum of £250 a month. It only gave like 3%, but it got me into the habit of only saving £250 a month. And that made my savings grow. And while my savings were growing, even at that low percent, I was able to educate myself on the next level of risk. And that was like ETFs and index funds. So when that money of the savings was compounding, after a while, when I got my pay rise, I was still doing the 250 a month saving in the bank. But the next 250, I put in index funds. And the index funds, usually they pay like 2, 3, 4% in dividends. So it's better than the 3% earlier. It's a little bit higher and a little bit more risk as well. And the value of the index fund can also go up or down. Now, once you've done that, you can go into like individual stocks that are a little bit more risky, like how do they call them? Blue chip stocks, like Apple, Amazon, those kinds of companies. But what I really looked for as a dividend investor, that's when I was in the index funds, I was really educating myself on dividend investing. So I looked for these companies that paid like, high dividends that were sustainable. And what you can do then, you go to these dividend websites that show you the dividend yields, and you buy those individual companies to add them to your portfolio. So now you have a safe cushion of money in the bank. You have a safe cushion of like index funds. And now you have a couple of individual stocks as well. So when you do all three, you have a cushion to fall back on. Like if something were to happen, you have your index funds. If something were to happen to the index funds, you have your savings. But nowadays, everyone wants to get rich quick, right? They go into crypto and they go into gambling. But you need to start with saving, especially if you live paycheck to paycheck. You may not like to hear this answer, but start with saving and educate yourself on the next level of risk until you are worth it. Like you earn the right to risk at the next level.
That's a really interesting point you mentioned about, I think there's a big confusion even for myself with the difference between knowing when I'm saving and what level I'm risking at, and like people don't realize that if you invest in or gamble in, let's just say there's more risk, $100 or £100 a month, and let's just say you've got 100 and you lose 10% on that, you need more than 10% to get back to even.
Yeah.
And so when the stock goes down 10%, you need to get to 11 or 12% to get back to that £100. So it can be a slippery slope. But like, what would you say that? Because I think there is a big struggle with knowing what the difference between investing and saving is. Like, surely most people are going to think, well, if I put my thing in a stock, I'm saving, right? Or if I put it in the S&P 500, which is what I'm currently doing right now, that's less of a risk than an individual company because I'm spreading it over 500 companies.
Yeah.
Some are going to be good, some are going to be bad. So what would you say about saving and risk? Like, what's the difference?
Well, saving, you keep the money for yourself. The money is in your bank account in your name, or you put it on your pillow. It's saving. It's your money. But if you invest, you actually bought something. You buy a stock, you buy a share, you buy an ETF. You invest in that company, in that stock, in that ETF. And when you save, you didn't buy anything. It's just sitting there in your account, under your bed, in a sock, whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's yours. It's like saved. It's almost like a safe in the bank with like, these numbers on the front to open it, lock. That's saving. It doesn't do anything. It's not invested.
But then we just discussed, like, right, the inflation and stuff going up, big percentage. So it almost feels like your analogy of putting it in a safe, but there's a load of moths in there and your money's made of fabric and it's getting eaten away.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you say the step is for somebody who, how much should they save before they start investing? And then what would be the next least risky but high reward step that someone could take? Because I think that's what we're all looking for. We're looking for that lottery win for little investment. I think that's what a lot of people are doing, but they're not finding anything apart from the lottery.
And it's absolutely foolish. If you look at the research on lottery winners, most people are broke again after a couple of years, or they spend it all. And this ties back to the beginning of the conversation. They don't have the self-worth that they actually feel worthy of getting that money. So what you need to start with saving, I would recommend, it's not about the amount that you save, it's just about getting into the habit of it. And I would start with a minimum of 10% of your salary. And many people say, oh, I cannot do that. But I promise you this, if you get your paycheck, immediately you put 10% in your account, you will find a way to live on the remainder 90% of your income. Maybe you have takeout one time less a week, or maybe you don't use gas and electricity so much, or maybe you have like a side hustle that you can make some extra money. But if you do that, that's when you really start to master your money and master your finances. Then after a couple of months, you realize, hey, I can do that. I'm going to increase it to maybe now 11% or 12% or 15%. So every 3 months, when you master that level of savings, that level of income, you can move up to the next layer. And I started doing this when I was a junkie addicted to drugs. So if I can do it as a junkie, everyone listening can do that. And in the worst case, you still have your savings at the end of the month to pay your bills. But that's not what I want people to do. You save it, you invest it. But in the very worst case, you have your money. But if you don't save, you have nothing. So there's literally nothing to lose by doing that.
Yeah, it's amazing what happens when you automate. And there's ways of doing that with your bank where you can actually set something up where you can have that going out of your account, out of mind, in a separate account maybe that's not even one of your usual banks. That's one of the things I started with. I can't even figure out how to get into there. So that was great.
That's the key. And in the UK, there's this great account called ISA. And with this account, you can actually invest £20,000 a year tax-free. So there's 2 types of ISA, actually more than 2 types, but the 2 main types are your LISA, which first homeowners can use to buy their first home or for retirement. And with that, you can save £1,000. You can save £4,000 a year, and the government gives you 25% bonus. So this is great for people, who are young, they're just starting out, and immediately you get 25% from the government on your deposits until you are of a certain age. Now, the other account that I mentioned is the ISA. And this is also, the LISA is part of your ISA with a maximum of 20,000 a year. So if you put £4,000 in your LISA, you have £16,000 in your ISA, or you can put the full 20,000 in there and you don't pay taxes on it. Like if you make dividend income or your stocks are growing and you want to sell them, you don't pay any tax on those returns. And as you said, Sam, it's a separate account as well. So it kind of forces me when I use that, like I don't take money out of it because I know I'm gonna lose some of that 20,000 limit that I already put in there. But yeah, another great way is do it in a separate account that you don't have access to. But the key is pay yourself first. Like the rich people, they pay themselves first, and the impoverished people pay themselves last.
And when you say pay yourself first, what does that actually mean to someone?
When you get your paycheck, immediately pay yourself first. Put it in that ISA account. Put it in your separate account that's just for you. It's not to pay the bills. It's not your credit card. It's your financial freedom fund. You need that money to grow. Otherwise, you don't have anything to show for it.
Yeah,
especially
I think of it as like sorry to interrupt. I think of it like an alter ego tax man that's somewhere that you're paying that you do not know about, that you have to pay him for your. It's almost like your future self. And also, if you have that savings, for me, it gives me fuck you money. Pardon the language, but like literally a moment where I can actually go, if I'm really unhappy in this job, I've got enough time to buy myself to be able to get out of it and go back into something else. You know, otherwise sometimes you just feel stuck, and we don't want that for you. I know time's getting close, so I wanted to just ask, like, how can people find more about you? I know you've got this how to increase your salary thing, which is something we've discussed briefly. But how can people find out a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, so the best way to contact me, send me a DM on Instagram. That's the quickest way to reach me. Or my website, bartmilatz.com. And that's Bart, Milatz. It's kind of an unusual name. So yeah, I would love to connect with you and hear, your struggles, your problems, your goals with money, and love to help you and serve you.
That's awesome, Bart. That's great. And what I'll do is I'll put in the notes as well about we'll put in a couple of links for the dividend places people can look at that, the LISAs and the ISAs, and just let people educate themselves a little bit more about that. And I'm sure we're going to do a couple of other rounds, but we want to make sure it's in bite-sized chunks so people can just sort of not get completely fire hydranted. Yeah, there's a lot of complexity, but we just want you to be able to move one forward step.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Bart, for having me.
Thanks so much, Sam. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.